What is the greatest real life plot twist in all of history? I'm going to simply take the answer you bare dead messenger gave 10 months ago to the same question. After World War I, France dictated the terms of armistice to the Germans. A mere 20 years later, after Germany had just got done with powering through the French in 6 weeks, Hitler set up a meeting in the same train car, in the exact same place as the armistice was signed after World War I, except this time, he was making the terms for the armistice to the French. Double quote. And, as you hell sheep added, and, even better, a few years later the Germans blew the train up while retreating so they wouldn't have to suffer the humiliation of signing another armistice in the exact same train car. Greeks giving the city of Troy a pretty wooden horse that was secretly full of armored warriors. At the start of the Cold War, Henry Murray developed a personality profiling test to crack Soviet spies with psychological warfare and select which US spies are ready to be sent out into the field. As part of Project MKUltra, he began experimenting on Harvard sophomores. He set one student as the control, after he proved to be a completely predictable conformist, and named him Lawful. Long story short, the latter half of the experiment involved having the student prepare an essay on his core beliefs as a person for a friendly debate. Instead, Murray had an aggressive interrogator come in and basically tear his beliefs to pieces, mocking everything he stood for, and systematically picking apart every line in the essay to see what it took to get him to react. But he didn't. It just broke him, made him into a mess of a person and left him having to pull his whole life back together again. He graduated, but then turned in his degree only a couple years later, and moved to the woods where he lived for decades. In all that time, he kept writing his essay, and slowly, he became so sure of his beliefs, so convinced that they were right, that he thought that if the nation didn't read it, we would be irreparably lost as a society. So, he set out to make sure that everyone heard what he had to say, and sure enough, Lawful's Industrial Society and Its Future has become one of the most well-known essays written in the last century. In fact, you've probably read some of it, although, you probably know it better as the Unabomber Manifesto. Edit. Thank you for the gold. The second tower getting hit on 9/11 changed everyone's perception of what was actually happening that day instantly. On the 28th of June, 1914, Gavrilo Princip's group the Black Hand ducked up the first time when it came time to assassinate Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo. His colleague was to throw a grenade under the carriage as the Archduke and his wife passed over. The grenade delayed and blew up as the next car came by. He panicked, swallowed a cyanide pill, and jumped in a nearby river. Except the cyanide pill just made him vomit, and the river was 6 inches deep, so he was caught pretty easily. Gavrilo Princip was pretty damn dejected and went to get some food at a local restaurant at this time. After the assassination attempt, Archduke Franz Ferdinand told his driver to head to the hospital where he and his wife could visit those injured from the failed plot on his life, cause hadn't been around for too long. So when the driver got lost and tried to reverse the car, it stalled right in front of the restaurant where Princip was finishing lunch. He walked outside, saw the Archduke standing there, and fired into his neck. The most revolutionary event of the 20th century was a do-over. Someone invaded Russia and it actually worked. Good job, Mongols. It's definitely Darius the Great's ascension to the throne of Persia. Basically, he was caught literally red-handed standing over his dead predecessor with a knife. "Oh it," thought Darius. "Oh it," said the Magi. "Call the guards. This guy just murdered the emperor." "Whoa guys, listen," interrupted Darius. "I know what this looks like, but it's not what it looks like. Not only did I not kill the emperor, but I can tell you who did kill him. It was this dead Methodica right here, who I realize looks quite a bit like the emperor, but what you need to understand here is that he was actually a shape-shifting wizard, right? So he killed the king and pod peopled his way to the throne. And all you guys are just lucky that you had someone like me here to avenge the rightful ruler, who I totally miss dearly." The Magi consulted, and with a chorus of "why would someone lie about something like that?" they unanimously decided to raise Darius the Wizard Slayer to the throne of Persia. Convicts getting sent to Australia, a much better country than where they came from. Attila the Hun turning back from his conquests after talking with Pope Leo I. There was that huge boat of Titanic proportions that was purportedly unsinkable. Too bad it wasn't iceberg proof. Lady I didn't have a sex with was pregnant. Plot twist. God did it and the baby was also the father. When Jimmy Kimmel revealed that he was behind the twerk fail video. People dreamed that the internet would be a tool for worldwide knowledge, informed discussion, and communication. However, it actually developed into a sophisticated pornography delivery system. When the Allied troops discovered the horror of concentration camps during World War II, I could not imagine preparing yourself for something like that. That a small-time strip club owner can walk into the Dallas police station and shoot the man who shot the Potters 3 days earlier in front of the entire police force. Edit. Grammar. Backstory. There was a samurai in Japan, circa 1600, named Miyamoto Musashi, who was frequently late to his duels. He was very skilled and world-renowned as one of the most talented samurai to have ever lived. One day, he decided to challenge the leader of the Yoshioka school, Seijiro, to a duel. Seijiro agreed, and as always, Musashi came late. He struck Seijiro with a single blow, crippling his arm and knocking him out. Seijiro decided to pass ownership of the school down to Denshichira, who immediately challenged Musashi back for revenge. Again, Musashi arrived late, disarmed and promptly defeated Denshichira. Here is where the plot twist comes into play. The head of the Yoshioka school is now the 12-year-old son of Denshichira, Masashichiro. He, and his entire force of archers, musketeers, and swordsmen, challenge Musashi to a final duel. Musashi decides that this time he is to arrive early and hide nearby. Fantastic. So when Masashichiro and his army come marching by to the place where the duel is to occur, expecting a tardy Musashi as always, he springs from his hiding spot and runs to Masashichiro, completely demolishing this 12-year-old kid. He then escapes from the force by drawing his second sword. TL. Dr. Samurai defeats an entire lineage of a martial arts school by changing from his usual routine of showing up late. Edit. Circa 1600 and his name was Miyamoto Musashi, for those wondering. Edit 2. Words. Edit 3. More words. The assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. The world pretty much spent the next 40 odd years down the rabbit hole. When King Louis V suggested the guillotine be triangular shaped, then the people used it to kill him. Hitler wanted to be a painter, ended up almost killing entire ethnicities of people. Joan of Arc helping the French defeat English, which led to them being driven out of France. 14-year-old girl coming out of nowhere, Orleans I think, to spank the English. Yi Sun Sin. Pretty much all of this guy's life was an epic twist. He joined the Korean military back in the 1500s when they were being invaded by Japan. He became a top commander and helped save his nation from being conquered by the Japanese. Then his jealous rivals had him framed, tortured, and imprisoned. When he was released from prison he re-enlisted in the military at the lowest rank, then was promoted all the way back up to commander and once again saved his nation from defeat against impossible odds. Edit. Fixed for accuracy. The end of World War II finding the death camps. Everybody was like, man, that Hitler guy is a massive douche. Stealing countries and imprisoning Jews and what have you. Wait, he killed them? How many? What the duck? Absolutely no one saw the Big Bang coming. World War I Germans have better tech, weaponry, more men, and are pretty much set up to win the war. Then England miraculously gets their spy department together. Q-boats stop U-boat combat. US joins the war, and tanks are invented, all in pretty short order. That a bunch of college kids would beat the Soviet army in the Miracle on Ice. The way they made it through the prelims and into the medal round. No one thought they had a shot. Besides them, Americans were so enthusiastic and supportive of the US team, but no one thought they could actually do it. In my opinion, it is and will forever be the greatest game ever played. The Cold War, the US hostages in Iran, the economy. There will never be a series of events that equates to those. It may not be the most significant event in history, but I do think it was the greatest twist. Japan attacking Pearl Harbor. That was a WTF just happened moment. Derrick Rose's return ending with a torn meniscus. Napoleon escaping Elba and sweeping back into brief power only to meet his Waterloo was a nice series of twists and turns. After the Treaty of Versailles was signed, Ferdinand Foch, a French general, exclaimed, "This is not a peace, it is an armistice for 20 years. Guess what happened 20 years and 2 months later? I got one. When WWE wrestler Chris Benoit and his family died, it was initially said they were murdered, and WWE had a memorial show on Raw for Chris Benoit, and about 18 hours later they found out Chris Benoit killed his family and hung himself, and decided to never acknowledge Chris Benoit ever again. When everything was all this crazy giant lizard movie and then bam. Plot twist. Metaphor. Monkeys take over and go to space. Lee Harvey Oswald getting point blank murdered 2 days after he was arrested for shooting JFK, before he had made any official confession. Dun dun dun. Canada tricking the US on 1812. When DB Cooper jumped off the Boeing 727 into a wormhole in the airspace over Portland, or in Seattle, WA, and was transported back to ancient times, only to become Jesus. It's not really a plot twist, but the Cold War was pretty anticlimactic. This Maginot Line is impenetrable. There's no way the Germans would go through the Ardennes. When Fry became his own grandfather. The English fought off a Viking invasion only to be invaded from the south by Normandy. Plot twist. Normandy was under the rule of the descendants of Vikings, so the Vikings still conquered them. In 1941 the tomb of Timur Khan was exhumed by Soviet anthropologists. Upon opening the tomb, an inscription within it wrote, "Whoever opens my tomb shall unleash an invader more terrible than I." Nevertheless, 2 days later Adolf Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, which was the largest military invasion of all time, and caused more death and destruction than other nation that fought in the war would suffer. Everything is going great for the European nobles when suddenly, Black Plague. The Spanish Inquisition. Nobody expected that. When that nutjob, who though the world was about 2/3 the size it actually is, didn't die on the ocean and somehow found a giant landmass that had stuff worth stealing on it. Epicurus was pretty much right. The universe is made of tiny bits of mindless matter which combine to make higher level structures, and nothing else. Plato and Aristotle were more than 2000 years of going down the wrong path. It turned out, after millennia, that guy had built a pretty good approximation of the world that no one would be able to prove for a very, very long time. Blockbuster opened their first store in 1985. A news article in a well-read financial magazine questioned Blockbuster's business concept and saying there was no future in that business. By 1993, Blockbuster became a multi-billion-dollar industry. At its peak, Blockbuster had up to 60,000 employees and more than 9,000 stores. In 2000, a man frustrated with having to pay Blockbuster's expensive late fees thought of an alternative to the video rental system and created Netflix. He approached Blockbuster to sell his company to them for $50 million. However, Blockbuster denied the offer, saying that there was no future in that business. As of 2012, Netflix's revenue is $3.61 billion with an operating income of $50 million. Earlier this month, Netflix expressed plans to premiere movies on the same day at opening in theaters. Meanwhile, Blockbuster is out of business. The last movie rented from Blockbuster was, appropriately enough, This Is the End. There has been no confirmation of whether the rental has been returned or if late fees will apply. Light is a wave and a particle. Chinese intervention in Korea was a pretty one. MacArthur sure didn't expect to have to fight over 1 million Chinese soldiers. That all the gold that the Spanish claimed ended up wreaking havoc on their economy and contributed to their decline as an empire. A man who was seriously considered to be the future leader of MI6, the British equivalent of the CIA, during the Cold War with the Soviet Union, was actually a highly effective spy for the USSR. If one of his mentally unstable friends hadn't defected to the USSR, casting suspicion on him, he may have become head of MI6. Name was Kim Philby. and he eventually defected to the USSR. Another one of his friends from uni ended up as the royal art curator for the Queen, and was highly respected in academic circles for art analysis, and he too was a highly placed spy. This was kept under wraps until Thatcher outed him in the early 80s. The Treaty of Versailles ends the worst war known to man at the time, but sparks a second world war, set up the modern day boundaries of the Middle East with no cultural considerations, and Woodrow Wilson denied Vietnam self-determination from France in order to get the treaty passed, eventually sparking the Vietnam War. The treaty that was exposed to end all wars sparked many of the current problems today. A whole lot of Western history so I doubt anybody will care about this, but when Gajah Mada, Prime Minister of the Majapahit, today, Indonesia, rose from humble beginnings to unite over 17,000. Think about that number for a second. Distinct and different islands only to eventually, and very, very strangely and suddenly, violently betray his own kind. He was quickly exiled and died in obscurity, a symbol of heroism and pride and a symbol of the recklessness of mankind at the same time. I wish more people knew about Southeast Asian history. They would make for some absolutely amazing cinema. Southeast Asia has stories, but not the Hollywood budget, so I'm hoping one day America will pounce on these kinds of ideas for movies. Bonus fact, he was very athletic, yet fat, kind of like an NFL lineman. Alexander the Great conquered 90% of the known world by the time he was 32 years old, and he wasn't even defeated. His armies just wanted to go home. He was this great conqueror who literally has control of most of the world before he's even middle-aged, and he lived in an age where assassination is common, and he had plenty of enemies. He dies when he's 32, not in battle, or in an assassination. He dies of what is apparently alcohol poisoning. One of the greatest conquerors the world has ever known died because he partied too hard one night. Another one is that around the time Genghis Khan was doing his raping and pillaging of Asia, there was a renaissance in Baghdad. They were a great, open society. There wasn't much oppression and they were even sexually open. It was a great time to be alive. Well, the Mongols came, and it got heavy, and Mongols being Mongols, they pillaged Baghdad. It set them back years, and eventually led to this great center of learning and new ideas to be one of the most oppressive and backwards places on earth. A ruler practices unprecedented clemency for his time to his foes and goes so far as to become a father figure to a young man who took up arms against him, only to die at his hand. Poor Caesar. He repeatedly ignored reports of plots against him, including the final one that did him in. World War I. 3 leaders of the main belligerents were related, 2 shared the same grandmother, and all of them had excellent facial hair. When the Portuguese started exploring the Far East, the Chinese had the mightiest navy in the world. They had ships 5 times the size of the Portuguese ships. They had landed 90,000 troops on the east coast of Africa. They would have kept the Europeans from colonizing the Philippines, Indonesia, and Indochina. Then, China burned its navy and razed the towns along its coast to focus on fighting the Mongols. I'm quite surprised that nobody has mentioned it. The atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. It was a turning point in history, and the only time nukes have actually been used in warfare, and it was completely out of the blue for the majority of the world. Just imagine it. 30 years earlier, war consisted of a bunch of guys in holes in the ground fighting over a field. Now, entire cities were being leveled with just one bomb. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand that led to World War I and arguably World War II. 6 Bosnian Serbs planned an attack on his motorcade along a route from Ilidza Spa to Sarajevo. The first 2 along the route had bombs but failed to act. The third conspirator along the route, Ibrinovic, tossed a grenade at Franz's vehicle, which bounced off the back of the convertible cover and blew up in the street, wounding 20 people. Ibrinovic, having failed, swallowed a cyanide pill and jumped into a nearby river. Well, the cyanide pill failed and the river was only 13 centimeters deep due to a hot weather. A crowd beat him and took him into custody. The motorcade raced away and the remaining 3 assassins failed to act, surviving the attack. Ferdinand, being a badass, decided to go to the hospital to visit the 20 wounded, instead of going into hiding. While Franz was traveling to the hospital, Gavrilo Princip, one of the 6 conspirators, was pissed off BC of the botched assassination and went to go get some food at Schiller's Delicatessen. On the way to the hospital, France's driver took a wrong turn and had to reverse the car. The car stalled as many old models did when going in reverse. Where did it stall, you ask? Right in front of Schiller's Delicatessen for awaiting Gavrilo Princip. Princip saw the car, walked outside and shot Ferdinand and his wife dead. Long story short, Franz Ferdinand's car stalled right in front of the restaurant where the assassin just so happened to be. This is one of the greatest and deadliest coincidences in human history, leading to World War I, World War II and life as we know it today. Connie 2012. One of my favorite modern day plot twist. It only took one YouTube video to have the whole country ready to start a movement. One man to masturbate on the streets of San Diego to put an end to it. I think one of the greatest plot twists, sadly, was the response by foreign countries to the Rwandan genocide. 50 years after the Holocaust and the Nuremberg trials, you have countries swearing off in the UN publicly that nothing this atrocious would ever happen again. And in 1994, governments just bailed on Rwanda. If you haven't watched The Ghosts of Rwanda, I think the single most bone-chilling thing is the UN peacekeepers had to stand there, not allowed to use weapons and seeing people massacred on the streets and can only pacify with their hands and voices. It's the concept that literally the planes out are only flying foreign citizens, and locals being slammed the gates on while the murdering frenzy is going on.